this computer. And okay, so I think it's actually doing what it's supposed to do. So we've got Dominic, and please correct me if I mispronounce your last name, but Colasante.
That's
Uh,
perfect.
haha, yes, of 2X Marketing with us today. And in past weeks, a few of you have asked me to cover a little bit more about like the psychology of interviews and prep for that stuff, resumes, CVs, what to do at like trade organizations and meetings and continuing ed stuff. The bulk of you, we know, are electrical maintenance students, but we do have some pre-business, pre-nursing, and I think one diesel mechanic. So we'll maybe see what we can do and talk a little bit about transposable skills. But Dom, if you want to, why don't you tell me a little bit more about exactly what you do as CEO of 2X?
Sure, happy to. Thanks for the chance to talk to your students, and hopefully I can impart some advice that's helpful in this very difficult time we're in. So I'm the CEO and founder of 2X. It's a marketing firm. It's about 100 people. We mostly work with companies in the software and technology industry and help with things like digital marketing, website management, email campaigns, advertising campaigns, things like that. My background, I've been in marketing my whole career, spent some time really in the software industry, large enterprises, big companies, marketing jobs, have been a chief marketing officer before, hired lots of people, worked with lots of people, and really have been in a place where I've learned over time that the success of a business or the success of a company or an organization is really dependent on the quality of the people. And so the getting the right people into an organization that are good culture fits, that are good skill fits, is really the difference between success and failure. So the topic you're bringing up around interviewing and resumes and is so critical for both the employer and the future employee. So happy to share some advice.
Okay, well, you mentioned culture fit. Why don't we start there and tell me a little bit more about what exactly you mean by cultural fit?
Yeah, I think there's different kinds of companies that I've worked in, and certainly hundreds of different kinds of companies in the industry that tend to, I think, have different amounts of structure. And one of the things I think is very important to know before you apply for a job, and also something that the hiring manager is going to want to try to figure out is different people respond in different ways to structure. Some people like really unstructured environments where they sort of have an entrepreneurial ability to do whatever they can dream up. Lots of freedom, lots of independent time, lots of really just self-starter. You sort of set your own destiny and go with it. Other companies are very regimented. They have processes and procedures and ways to do things and standards, and they want to govern very closely to those. And one of the things I've seen is people tend to gravitate towards one or the other. They tend to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations, or comfortable in places with a lot of structure and constraints. And that's something I think that certainly is critical to culture fit, in my view.
Okay. So then how do we go about finding that? If I'm looking at, I don't know, Indeed or the Minnesota job banks, because that's where we're located, in northern Minnesota, um, and I see, I don't know, a position for electrical maintenance person for, I don't know, Mintac Mines. And I'm trying to figure out what's the culture fit, and maybe I'm not originally from the area. How do I go about finding
Yeah, I might say that the culture fit is probably more, or at least in the use case I was describing of like structured versus unstructured, it's probably more related to an industry than a particular company. I think certain roles you mentioned, there's some pre-nursing students that tends to be more regimented, right? There's processes and procedures for good reason. I imagine there's the same in some of the trade areas where there's a good way to do something. And so maybe why don't we back up from culture fit and
that?
more of, I think, if you're on the path of trying to find the right fit and trying to get the employer to notice you, I think maybe a key there would be, there are certain things that a profile needs to have to be appropriate for a job. There are requirements for certifications or training or education or work experience or having gone through an apprenticeship or certain kinds of training programs. And I think one of the key things of the interview process is to suss out making sure that the candidate and the employer are aligned on the right profile for what they need. And I think as a candidate, being transparent and simple in your explanation of what skills you have allows the hiring manager to, I think, see if you check those boxes of the things that they believe are minimum requirements for the role. And I think that allows you to get to job fit, which is probably more important than culture fit. I think it's sort of like the in the Maslow hierarchy, right? You have to have the right skills first, and then I think the culture fit is the things that really allow you to excel. But I think having the minimum requirements is probably the first thing to convey when you're on an interview journey.
Okay. Ooh, nice phrasing too. All right. So like then if you're in the interview and like people are trying to ask you, get some questions, get to know you a little bit better and maybe gauge your fit, like how do you manage that kind of balance between like trying to, display and convey that you have these required skills and maybe a little bit more and not maybe get sidetracked with trying to sell yourself as a person character for that culture fit.
Yeah, I think there's two things that employers look for when they're hiring. The first is they want someone who can do the job. That's the most important. They want someone that has the ability and skills to do the job that they're hiring for. The second is, frankly, whether employers will admit it or not, it's some version of likability. They want someone who's interesting, who is someone they want to work with, who's someone, I mean, you end up spending more time at work and the people you work with than you spend with your family normally. And so employers, I think, are equally as interested in, you know, working with someone who has the skills to do the job well, but also has something interesting, has some aspiration, energy, creativity, and depending on the roles, depending on the job, some of those things may be more important than others. But I think when you're in an interview, it's critical to convey that you have the necessary skills to do the job, and also convey something that's memorable, something that the employer would appreciate. You know, stories of your background. Have you fought through adversity and overcome it? Um, have you done something really unique and worth talking about that could form a bit of a rapport and an interesting relationship foundation? I think those pieces, the sort of soft skill, relationship building elements, are, frankly, in my view, just as important as the um, the foundational skills to do the job.
Okay, so then that kind of leads into what are some things that employers like can't ask during an interview, or at least what they shouldn't ask, and then to follow up with what that answer might be. Like if you're in the middle of an interview and you get asked one of those questions, how do you redirect?
Yeah, well, so I'm not an expert on employment law, but having hired a lot of people, you learn the boundaries, and there's certain protected things in U.S. Labor law, disability, age, marital status, sexual orientation. Um, there's others, religion, that you can't make hiring decisions based on race, ethnicity, obviously. And so employers generally won't ask you those. If they do, it's illegal. And there's an official list somewhere that I'm sure you can pull to look at those things. And I think most employers are good people and want to follow the law, but also don't want to discriminate on any of those bases. So you generally won't go there. But I think what you'll get to them trying to learn about you as a person, which sometimes goes into some of those areas and isn't meant, I think, to cross those boundaries. It's meant to just form. Am I going to enjoy working with this person? Am I gonna want to invest extra time to make them successful and care about their dreams and hopes and aspirations? Because I think in the same way that they're interviewing you for the job, you should be interviewing them to make sure that they're a good fit for you. Even though we're in a bit of a difficult labor market today, to say the least, um, you don't want to work in a place where you can't meet your career goals. And a significant driver of getting to your career goals is the quality of the manager that you get and the quality of the company that you work for. And knowing that they care about people, that they care about you as an individual, that they have dreams of having you grow with the business or you grow individually or professionally, or those are important as well. And I think that conversation about sort of social non-employment factors is meant to sort of test that for both sides, but it shouldn't cross into that area where there's laws against it, and employers shouldn't be making hiring decisions based on those decisions either. I'm a big believer that the more diverse a workforce is, the more valuable the workforce is. Diversity leads to diversity in thinking and diversity in background and experiences, and all that diversity is good for a lot of different professions, a lot of different careers. But I think part of it is meant to just get to know you as a person. And I think don't be afraid in an interview to share who you really are. That's my point of being memorable and being someone that forms that relationship and rapport. But a lot of that's on the softer side. You've got to have the capabilities to do the job, and you've got to be able to clearly articulate and demonstrate that the foundational requirements to be successful in that position.
Okay. So if I'm going into your office for an interview, and we're going along in the process, maybe I'm just going to be full of myself here and say I'm not going to knocking the questions out of the park, right? I'm getting home runs back and forth, and then I say something that's maybe like a red alert for you. What are some things that people that you've interviewed have done or said that kind of are that thing that makes you sit back and be like, whoa, this probably isn't a good sign for me?
Yeah, a good manager or a good employer or someone who's had a lot of experience hiring, if they hear something that's a red flag, they're going to raise it and they're going to ask you about it. They're not going to like sit with it and then they just like don't hire you. They're going to say, hey, you said that. That doesn't make sense to me. Or you said that, and why did you say that? Or you said that. What would it matter if it was this situation? What do you have done? They're going to probe on it because they're going to pull and try to see if that was just a fluke. People are nervous during interviews. That's very common, and you don't want to make a decision on someone based on one thing that they said that maybe you misinterpreted. And so if you got to the interview, the employer's already invested time in reading your resume and scheduling the interview, and they're not going to let it go for one misstatement if there's someone who's had experience with hiring lots of people, because they're going to know that people are accidents happen and they're going to dig into it. And so you'll see that, hopefully. If you see someone really digging in on something, that means that there's a misalignment of what they want versus what capabilities you represented, or they misunderstood something you said. And I think you should embrace that. And I think you should welcome that opportunity, because it's really a chance for you to save yourself if you maybe have misspoke unintentionally. The biggest thing I drill in on is anything that feels like it's made up or dishonest. As a marketer, I mean, we get paid to spin stories that may make things seem larger than life, and that's our job. It's our profession. There's a way to do that ethically and honestly, but there's also a line to cross. And I think some people, you think of like the proverbial used car salesman, who you could just tell it's not an authentic, honest point of view. I jump on that as soon as I hear it. I'll start digging in and seeing if they, really, maybe I just misunderstood. Maybe it is just a thing that I hadn't expected. But I think honesty and authenticity is something that generally causes a red flag, and I would encourage you not to overmarket your skills. It will only hurt you. I would encourage you not to overmarket what you can do. It's being transparent and honest and truthful will earn you more points than over positioning what you have the abilities to deliver, because it'll get found out eventually, either in the interview or when you're in the job, and you don't want that. You don't want to be in a position where expectations are higher than you can deliver on. But I think other places where it may come up is perhaps in, I mentioned the piece about over marketing skills. It could be in understanding the kind of experiences you've had and connecting those to how they may relate to the job. And that's a bit of an art form. Sometimes, I mean, if you're applying for a job very similar to a job you already had, that's easy. But if you're switching industry or you're switching profession or you're switching to a different kind of company, you're going to have to try to like make connections of how a situation, and that there'd be questions like, how would you deal with a situation like this? And you try to use an example that's sort of different, but has in your mind some connection. Um, if that connection isn't clear, the employer is likely going to push on it and say, well, I don't understand how those things are the same. Or I don't understand how doing this in this situation would result in a good outcome here. And some of that's genuine curiosity that the employer is sharing to learn more about your background and your experiences and how you think and your character. But I think when you're trying to make those connections, again, try to be as simple and direct in what you're saying, and then be prepared to go a couple levels deeper if the employer wants to probe.
Okay. So yeah, so really just letting them guide start off with the that simplicity instead of trying to, get on a soapbox and tell about this epic legend of how you decided to baby switch careers from underwater basket weaving to in space basket weaving.
Yeah, there's be um, be thoughtful of the point of what you're saying. Like, if you're trying to make a connection of
Uh-oh. Ruh-roh. Let's see if we can get him
that,
back. Oh, oh, there we go.
say that, like make that point.
Sorry,
We blipped out?
yeah, we had a uh, probably on my end. It's about it's been pretty windy up here, but
No
cut
worries.
out there for the last minute or so.
There was some profound statement I said there that's probably gone or hopefully been recorded.
All right, all right. Good, good. So one of the other questions that I've gotten a few times is now, um, if a person got fired from a previous position, or it was a less than amicable leave, and they're in an interview, and maybe there's a gap in the employment, or they're being asked about why they left their previous position. How do you handle that, or what's the a good way to sell yourself while still being honest?
Yeah, that's a great question. Really good question, and that's difficult. You said it right. You have to be honest. If you if you are untruthful, um, it won't benefit you. But I think be honest about the conditions. I think most people get fired or are laid off or are downsized or made redundant because of a misalignment in fit. The job wasn't a fit to your abilities, or the culture of that company wasn't a fit to your aspirations, or the company, frankly, just didn't have a good run and needed to lay off staff and it had nothing to do with you. I think it's appropriate and okay to share those things with an employer. Um, Depending on how big of an issue you think it is, like if it's a glaring red flag on your resume and you know your employer saw it, you may want to proactively address it. If it's a minor piece, like you've had 10 jobs and one of them didn't go so well, I would worry about it only if they ask. I wouldn't necessarily lead with it because I think then it makes a bigger thing out of something that's fairly small. But if it's a major issue that you know the other person's thinking, it's better if you bring it up first. It seems like you're not afraid of it. It seems like you're being honest about it. And I think saying that, and I believe most cases, it was they wanted something I couldn't offer or didn't offer, or they had an expectation that I didn't believe was the kind of environment that I fit for. And um, you got to position it a little bit so it like wasn't your fault. I think that's critical. I think if you just say, look, I didn't show up at work, I didn't do good work, and I got fired, like that's probably the end of your interview. So you don't want to tell a story that didn't have hope in it. You have to put some, but maybe you were going through an extraordinarily difficult time because of a issue in your family or personal life, and that impacted your work life, and that resulted in needing more personal space. I think some of that shows that you're a human being and shouldn't necessarily hurt you if you have the skills the employer is looking for and you've been able to make that rapport and connection so that you're likable. I think those pieces, you can overcome those items. But I think you've got to think about Are you going to proactively address it? Or are you going to wait till they ask about it? And if you're going to proactively address it, how are you going to tell the story in such a way that doesn't damage you, but makes it clear that there was a set of circumstances that just wasn't a fit for either you or the employer?
Okay, very diplomatic. I like it. Um, okay, so then the other thing is going to be just general etiquette during an interview because, like, up here we grew up with a lot of us grew up with the idea of you always shake the hand of the interviewer and you wait for them to sit down no matter how many times they tell you to sit down first. And even if you're going for a job with McDonald's, you go with a suit and tie. What are some of your etiquette approaches or expectations when you're interviewing people?
Yeah, and some of those rules aren't bad. I think they're universal, and they may be overkill in some places that you mentioned. So the two rules I would say, I guess, one is on attire. You can never go wrong with a suit and tie or a business professional attire in an interview. Um, I think it's also okay, depending on where you're going to work, if you have a step down from that. But the guidance I always give is be one category above what the normal dress of the employees in that company are. So if you're going to work at Facebook and everybody wears a hoodie, showing up with a suit and tie may not be a good thing. They're going to think the lawyers are here, the accountants are here. Who is this like really put together person? But so you want to be dressed in a way that makes them see that you're professional and put together and well organized in your personal life. I don't think it's very rare you will go wrong by cutting suit and tie, but I think it's okay if they have a very casual culture. If you're just a single step above, and there's lots of writings about business professional, business casual, different kinds of attire levels. I think it's in my view, in my world, in a marketing agency where everybody wears hoodies and jeans and maybe in my world, if somebody comes in for an interview and they're wearing a suit or a sport coat and no tie, that's okay. They're still, dressed professionally, but they didn't go way overboard. But I wouldn't hold it against someone if they overdressed in my world. And I don't think most companies would, but it's um, some might if you're in a super casual place. As far as etiquette goes during the interview, I look at a concept called mirroring. If you're familiar with it, it's where you
Mhm.
try to follow the lead and tone and behaviors of the interviewer. And so if they have a more casual tone, I think you can adopt a more casual tone. If they're very, strict and professional and short questions and short answers, try to adopt their style. So try to follow the cues and the body language and the behaviors they're exhibiting and try to mimic those such that you're on their level with how they're conducting themselves. Um, and I'm sure there's lots of research on how humans form personal relationships with others, and that I think drives some of that rapport. I also think it's until you know how they're going to conduct themselves in the interview, you should sit up straight. Don't slouch. Use professional language. Don't be way too casual. Don't tell a bad joke in the beginning of the interview. Like you should start from a very professional place and allow yourself to get a little more casual if they get more casual. Um, but I think erring on the side of being more polished and professional is almost always a good thing. Generally won't hurt you. Erring on the side of being too casual, too sort of freewheeling, too laid back can hurt you quite a bit. You'll seem like someone who doesn't take the job seriously, or someone who isn't really invested in trying to show their best self to the interviewer.
Okay, nice.
Especially
Um,
one other corner comment in today's world, shaking hands, like I think
yeah, that one
but
may be a little out of the window now.
maybe not the fist bump either. That's a bit of a casual thing, right? Some people are
Right.
cool with that. Others you don't know them that much yet. So I think that's the one. I don't have an opinion on that. I'm sure there's a medical issue there, but um, it's more about the way you conduct yourself during the interview than those like single moments of, "Hello, my name is Dominic. Here's my resume. I would like to interview with you." Like, don't be a robot. Like, be a human being. But try to follow the style that matches your interviewer.
Okay. So you bring up another really good point then that being robotic, which is usually, a sign of being nervous, being kind of worked up
Yeah.
before. And, sometimes, yeah, those our anxieties can really motivate us. It can get us moving. It can encourage us. But sometimes it gets a little overwhelming, and then we come out as robot. What are some of your tips for folks going into an interview if they're having some of that jitteriness right beforehand?
Yeah, I think the way I look at it, when I can tell someone's nervous, as long as it's not crippling nervousness, they could still function. I look at it as a good sign. It means they really want the job. It means that this is important to them and they want to work at my company. I don't ding someone for that necessarily. And so maybe if you're someone who gets nervous, know that your employer may be like me in that sense. It may not be hurting you significantly. But I think there's a line to that. You have to be able to have a conversation. You have to be able to conduct yourself in a way that um, uh, shows who you are and what you know and what your experiences are. And if you're nervous to a point to where that's at risk, I think you've got to look at strategies to reduce that. Perhaps things like doing mock interviews with family or friends, going through, tell me about yourself, and having like a not totally scripted, but at least like the story flow oriented in a way that it's not the first time you're answering that question and you're paralyzed by the thought of saying the wrong thing. I think you need to be comfortable enough so that you can get through it. Uh, so strategies like, I mean, and this is good stuff to Google, like the most commonly used interview questions. There's frankly a lot of hiring managers out there with not a lot of experience that Google the same thing and then ask you those questions. Why are manhole covers round? What is your biggest strength? What is your biggest weakness? Tell me about a situation of adversity and how you overcame it. Tell me about, why do you want to work here? My favorite question, what do you know about us? You have to have an answer to that. That's where they're testing how much research did you do on the company? Um, and sometimes that's the first question I'll ask. What do you know about 2X? And if someone's like, well, I don't know anything about you, like that's the end of the interview. You didn't invest the time to prepare yourself. So I think one way to get the nervousness down is to familiarize yourself with the kind of questions you're likely to be asked, to come up with, at least in general, the kind of responses you would give, and to practice that so you sort of have a feel for it. That will make you less nervous because you'll be more confident in the answers you're going to give. But also don't I don't tell the story a lot. My first job, I worked at a company called, or my first corporate job, once I got out of college, I worked at a company called SAP, which is a big software company, and I thought I had the worst interview of my life. Like they were asking questions, I was answering them. The body language from my interviewer was kind of like weird. I didn't get a good feeling. And on my way out to the parking lot, I got called with the job offer. And apparently the interviewer thought like the reason they were short answers or short questions was because I was checking every box. He was just moving down the list of like, yep, do that, do that. It wasn't really a problem, but I walked out feeling like I didn't do so well at that one. And so don't overthink it and don't you really don't know. You don't know how you do until you get a call back. Don't let yourself become crippled by that anxiety or the unknowing of what happened. Go in there, be yourself, do the best you can, and let the chips fall where they do. And don't lose hope. Continue to do that. If you continue to tell the world or the employer who you are, what you've done, what your background's about, and show them your capabilities, you'll find the right match and sort of keep up the faith in doing that and show your best self.
Cool. So if we're going a little maybe non-traditional route to getting a job, maybe somebody's going off to like a trade show, continuing ed convention up around here in St. Louis County. We have the Minnesota Nurses Association will put on a convention. The St. Louis County social workers will put on their own convention, and it's open to like an entire field. It's a really strong like networking event. What are some tips or tricks to kind of selling yourself at those events or finding new opportunities, making those connections, and especially if a person's more on the introverted side?
Yeah. And there's something we need to talk about out on the list about resumes. I'll cover that later, but resumes are a
Yeah.
big part of that. But when it comes to the shows itself, um, networking is great. If you can network your way into a job, you already start with half of the boxes checked. Um, whether it's been through a show, or either if you know someone in the field, you can get a referral, or you've had some kind of like personal um, recommendation to get into, or some kind of personal relationship that preceded them seeing your resume for the first time. That is hugely valuable to you. So you should go to those shows. You should meet people, and you should. I'm an introvert, which maybe actually a lot of people don't know that. Like I'm a marketer, I'm a CEO. I get energy from being alone, and I expend energy when I'm in groups. And that took me a long time to figure out how to balance that. Um, one thing I forced myself into is you have to make yourself uncomfortable. If you don't like being in large groups and you don't like having human to human interaction as a favorite part of your day, you have to just force yourself into that situation. Go talk to someone. Like just go up to them and talk to them, and force yourself to do that. It'll get easier. But unfortunately, the world there are too many extroverts in this world, and us introverts have to find a way to live in that world. And so, go to the shows, um, talk to people, and my biggest advice for you would be memorable. Have something in the interaction that person, because that person's going to talk to 100 people today, maybe 1,000 in behalf of the company if they have a bunch of recruiters and they're meeting lots of people, and it's one of those bigger career fairs. You have to say something that they remember. Ideas. If you know the companies that are going to be at the show, do some research on them. Um, come up with some things that you may be able to say about your background that's really relevant. Hey, I worked in the industry just like yours. I just worked at this company that's one of your peers or competitors, and we had a very similar. Don't share obviously competitive information, but the job that you're looking for is actually very similar to the job I've done before, and so I know exactly what you're looking for. Like make yourself. That's one way to like, wow, that person like really knew what I want and seemed to have the right expertise. Like that goes in the pile of resumes that I'm going to follow up with after the show. Um, or from doing some research on the company, ask questions, even if you don't necessarily care about the answer. But as a way to form rapport and to create a discussion with someone, ask them questions about the business, ask them questions about how the environment is impacting their business or organization or company. Um, ask them thoughtful questions. Don't be so like, how is the economy helping your business? Like, how is I see that you sell a lot to oil and gas companies, and the oil and gas industry is obviously in an oversupply situation today. How is that impacting your operations? Like that may be an interesting conversation. Wow, that's a really good question. This person's really well researched. That's thoughtful. I'm going to actually respond to this question. I may not know the answer, but I'm impressed that they asked a really thoughtful question. Um, a lot of these shows I think comes down to homework. And even if you don't know the companies are going to be there beforehand, even if you get there early and kind of like look at the companies and then like go off and like spend some time on your phone and come up with some questions and try to say something that's more of like, hi, I'm Dominic, here's my resume. I would like to interview at your company, please. Like you have to build that relationship in some way. I think that's your best hope of getting remembered from the many people that they're going to talk to.
Great. And one thing that I mean, I'll share too, just from my personal experience, because I mean, I'm a pretty extreme introvert as well, and part of like managing some of that too is if you do get into some of those conversations, and especially if it's in you're in a position where maybe you're not the other person isn't stuck at a booth, but you guys are maybe moving around a little bit. If you can find kind of the edge of the convention area, so it's a little less daunting, you're a little less surrounded, that can go a long way in helping ease your nerves and make you feel a little bit more at ease to focus on that person rather than, oh my God, there's 100, 1,000 people all around me, and this is very loud and overwhelming. So, you know, I've talked before about mental health being spycraft and bringing in the art of war and other philosophies. So controlling that geography, if you can, just to put yourself at ease and something that's not necessarily going to hurt you either.
That's a great point, and I love that idea. I would add to it, spark another thought. It's an area where you may need to if you're an introvert, you may need to warm yourself up to be able to like have those conversations. And look, if there's 100 employers there or 20 employers there, and like you got the ones you really want to talk to, maybe you got the ones that you don't care about so much, you go practice on them first. And that may be a way to just like start yourself talking and start up the engine. And so you warm yourself up to be able to have those kind of interactions with ones that maybe aren't the ones you really care about. And it could be some of those you start in a more casual way. Like, so how's the show been for you? Do you have a lot of candidates coming? Are you expecting a lot today? Do you do these shows all the time? Is that your role? Are you responsible for career fairs? And so this is a way to like start conversation that isn't about you, but is about the person you're talking to. Maybe an easier way to ease into that.
Right. And so one of the ones that the bulk of y'all especially the what was the morning class before we went all online is at the Discovery Center slash Iron World. Sometimes twice a year, there is a major job fair for all the industries, especially mining is the big one, but there are some for electrical maintenance, a couple of manufacturing places like Twist Drill, and it is a very convention style type of job fair. They do have kind of information sessions, training sessions on top of having the employers line up in the hall. So it's a really great opportunity for you to experience that. And this isn't something that that's going to be restricted only to fields like nursing or mental health or other academic heavy fields. So this is something that you can get in experience and in our local area, considering Chisholm's only 5 miles from the college. Um, so do keep a lot of this in mind, especially if you haven't had a job lined up yet. And I know a lot of you are towards the end of your second year for the electrical maintenance program, so this is really the time to be going out there and, well, okay, maybe not physically going out there right now, but approaching and getting ready to hit up some of these events when things get a little back to normal. Now, I kind of did this backwards. I started with the interview, then the convention. So maybe I need to dial it all the way back to the actual resumes and applications, those kind of required components. And so I think most of the students have experienced some level of resume writing or seeing them having an idea of what they are. But a good resume is an entirely different beast. And as an employer, Dom, what exactly are you looking for to be on that resume?
Yeah, resume is vital. And before I answer the resume, there was one idea you sparked while you were talking. Something I did when I was in college that was really helpful to me, back to the point about getting the nervousness down, is somebody recommended I record myself answering the interview questions. And then I watched the recording of myself, which was like really awful. It was hard for me to watch it, but it also, wow, do I really say things like that? Or do I really I do that, but I move my hands too much when I talk? And that helped me actually be a better interviewer. And so from the prior conversation, but join a Zoom, join a video session, record yourself answering the questions, then watch it back. You will become a better interviewer, I promise you, even though it'll be difficult. To your question about resumes. Yes, resumes are important. The biggest thing that employees, job seekers, applicants don't know is how little time your resume gets looked at, which means how important the words you put on the resume are. When I've hired people, you have a stack of 100 resumes, and you're busy. You got a lot of things to do, and you're trying to sift through. And so you make your first pass, you go through, you read each one for about 5 seconds, maybe 10. Did anything in this resume hit any keyword, key thing that I'm looking for? If then it goes into the maybe pile. If no, it goes over here. And employers are sorting resumes. Most do that. Some do it with software now. They actually use automated software to just crawl through and what are the keywords I want to see? And in every field, there are certain ones that are important for that. If I don't see this keyword anywhere in the resume, don't even show it to me. And so think about those keywords and make sure they're prominent for a human eye, but also present for an electronic eye. That's the first thing employers do. Do you have anything in this resume that fits the kind of things I think I should see? And you turn 100 into 20, maybe 30. And then you go through and you pick up the 30 and you go through them a little more detail. And really, I think that second wave the employer is looking for, is there anything in here that really grabs my attention? Because all these 30 people seem to have the minimum requirements, but there's something jump out at me. They've had a lot of experience in what I'm after. They've had, a tremendous academic track record. They've worked at a company that I recognize and know. They frankly, some things like they 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 tell a story that resonates with me in just terms of, they were an Eagle Scout, they were in the they played sports. They were some pieces that may resonate with your interviewer. And I think it's okay to include those sort of non-professional things on your resume, because there's a chance that that employer was also an Eagle Scout, or that employer also played football, or that employer also played field hockey, or that employer did swimming. And those pieces may connect to them and make them more likely to want to talk to you. And so they're like, first wave, do I have the keywords? Second wave, is there anything in this resume that makes me want to talk to this person? And then they get down to maybe 10 and then they read all 10. And they go through and like, all right, and then maybe they throw out 2 because there's something in there that really seemed off, and then they interview 8 or 5. Most applicants don't know that process happens, and so by knowing that's what's going to happen to your resume, reverse engineer that into how you build your resume. First, simple, 1 page, generally more than enough, unless you're going after a extremely difficult senior technical thing where you have to have lots of different experiences. Getting your resume to 1 page, very important, and not 1 page front and back, like one single side front page. But also having some white space so it's like easy to read. Like if you've ever scanned documents, when there's just full of text, it just is overwhelming and you just ignore it. Think of the formatting such that it will draw your eye to the places where you're focusing on the certifications or technical items that you have that may be specifically required for the job. Make it easy for the employer to see those, maybe a bigger font, maybe bold, maybe up top, maybe in a section with a lot of white space around them. Make sure that you have the minimum characteristics as keywords, very easily identifiable. And then also make sure that there's something on your resume that's memorable. And it could be many things on your resume that are memorable, based on prior experiences, based on sports, or if you started a business, or things that could be important. If you're able to put those nuggets there, you're trying to use the resume as a way to think of it as you're using the resume as a way to get them to read more. And so you're giving them, it's a lot like marketing. You're giving them a small nugget that hooks them in and grabs their interest, and then they spend more time on your resume. And so write it with that kind of philosophy in mind, that you're trying to put things in there that are going to grab someone's eye as they're scanning it, that's going to resonate with them in terms of the qualifications, that's maybe going to jump out at them as something interesting they want to learn more about. That's the way you get your resume in the pile of ones that are really read. And then when they're really read, you can stand on the qualifications that you've had. They'll read your different experiences. They'll look at the different jobs you've had. They'll read the 5 bullets under your last employer where you're talking about all the great things that you did, that you were employee of the month, that you were those pieces. Some of those, like employee of the month, may not be something that you want them to necessarily grab out of the gate, because everyone's resume has something like that in there. But when they finally do read it, it'll form a more complete um, visual of who you are, but be memorable. Find something in there that's going to grab their attention.
Okay, so then you really hammered in the idea of 1 page for the resume. If I'm somebody who's had multiple jobs in a short period of time, and that's not enough real estate for me, how do I trim that down, or how do I only highlight some of the more relevant experience without making it look like I have either major gaps in my work history, or avoid making it look like maybe I'm being perceived as unreliable?
Yeah, that's also a misunderstanding of candidates, that your resume needs to be like a perfectly accurate, um, legend story of your life. It doesn't have to be. For example, you were in college, you worked at 3 different restaurants. You worked at Applebee's, you worked at Chipotle, you worked at McDonald's. You don't need to put Applebee's, Chipotle, and McDonald's. You can say I worked at 3 different quick serve restaurants during my college career. 1 line. right? Unless there was something in those experiences. You were an assistant manager at one, you won the sales competition at one, you spent a lot of time on, maybe there's a story you want to tell that's relevant to the employer that is worth that additional real estate on your resume. But if you're just chronologically describing the things that you did, it's okay to cluster and bundle and summarize and put them together and say, hey, over these period of 3 years, I worked in various quick serve restaurants, including ABC, and did these kind of things at all three. That compresses that section, which may not be, it may be or may not be, but let's say it's not something that's really going to resonate with your employer because you did it to get money for college versus you did it to build professional skills. Although I would argue restaurants are great with multitasking and customer service. If you're chasing a job that requires multitasking and customer service, it's a great thing to talk about. But if you're not, simplify it. And even like in your education and your background, maybe you could put like the program you went to and all the courses you took. And that's relevant if those courses are related to the job that you're pursuing, or if they're a bunch of general ed courses that everyone takes. Well, don't use the space for that. Everyone who has a degree has taken English and math and those simple areas. So think about being brief and summary level where you need to be, and think about use that additional space to have more detail where that job is really relevant to the kind of job you're applying for. That also means maybe you want to customize your resume for every different employer that you reach out to. I'm a fan of that. As a marketer, I'm a fan of one-to-one. If you can talk to someone as an individual versus someone as everyone. So maybe you have a standard resume, and then maybe you take parts of it that you really compress or expand on based on the kind of job you're applying to. Or maybe you write a summary, a sentence-long summary about what job you're looking for, and position that along the lines of the job that you're applying for. Find a way that's back to being memorable. If you have in the top of your resume, I am looking for a role that includes X, Y, and Z, and from the job description that role includes X, Y, and Z, you've now just connected yourself to that job specifically, and that's a good way to jump out in that initial screening. But don't be afraid to summarize things. Don't be afraid to collapse, multiple years or multiple jobs into 1 or 2 line items, and just put it was a collection of, especially if they have common factors. To collapse those together, most employers aren't going to have a problem with that. And if they have a question, they'll ask you.
Cool. All right. And I'm just thinking, I think we've hit on all the questions that I've been forwarded to on. So I think.
I have one last one on resumes.
Oh, yeah, please.
Don't have typos in your resumes. It's a pet peeve of mine. You cannot have spelling, grammar, typographical errors. And like, if you can get it formatted in a way that it looks nice, like that you've got some understanding of Microsoft Word, that may not be your forte. There's actually a lot of places on the internet where you can get a resume redesigned. There's like freelancer sites like Uber for resume writers, places like Upwork and Fiverr where you can go on and just for $10 get someone to visually format your resume so the fonts and styles and bullets are all aligned correctly. That's important. But do not have any typos or any mistakes in your resume. Even if I like a candidate, I'm most likely going to put them in the no pile because that shows me low attention to detail, and it shows me that they don't really want this job. And so have a friend read it, get it professionally proofread, spend a couple dollars for that, or call in a favor. Make sure you don't have those mistakes on it.
Okay, wonderful. And yeah, add that to how you guys write your final paper here. I'll be releasing that this coming Monday, so it won't be bad. It's not going to be tough like the midterm paper. It's just going to be a strictly reflection paper on what you did and what you picked up or didn't like through the class. So no, it's not going to be nearly as tough as that functional assessment I had you guys do. But we'll talk about that at another time. For now, I just want to say thanks so much, Dom, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to kind of meet with me and answer some of the questions that I was forwarded. And yeah, I think if we were in class and I had all the students live with me here, there'd be many applause and clapping and other respectful gesturing. However, my Wildwoods clock here that's older than me will just have to do. enjoy the peace and serenity of the gratitude, and have yourself a wonderful day. Thank you.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for the time and good luck. And for anyone that sees my name on the bottom of the Zoom, feel free to, if I can help you in any way, drop me a note, find me on LinkedIn. Would love to give you more advice if you need it or you want to explore anything more. So good luck and thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Hey, so